Rita Litton is an award-winning acting coach. She is the founder and former director of ACTeen Inc., which is the nation's first on-camera acting program for teens, where for over 30 years, she trained an illustrious roster of working graduates in film, television, and commercials. Welcome to the Actor's Career Compass, where we help aspiring screen actors find high quality auditions, sign with great agents, and book major roles in legit productions. I'm your host, Martin Benson, and today you'll learn a series of extremely helpful tips and tricks to make your acting more natural and real for both screen and theater performances. Thanks so much for joining me, Rita. I am very excited to chat with you today.
Likewise, great to be here.
Awesome. So let's dive right into some of these questions. The
Let's do it.
first thing that I wanted to ask is just to kind of go right into it. What is one of the most helpful pieces of advice? You work as a coach. So what piece of advice have you found to be like super duper helpful when you're working with students in your class when it comes to acting?
I think the thing that I work on the most is that acting is doing. And that goes with work to do, not to feel. A lot of actors will go, oh, how should I feel here? I could feel this way or I could feel that way. Do you think I need more of this or that? And I say, it comes down to you don't actors shouldn't come into a set or onto a set or stage to feel something. They should come in to do something. And if they're successful, they're happy or they're excited or they're proud. If they're not successful, they're angry. Emotions are generally the result of whether your objective is achieved or not. So I think they put it backwards. And if I can get them to kind of figure out what they want, particularly if their want takes them directly in need of their partner and puts them perhaps at loggerheads, then the scene comes alive. So just remember that it's not about feelings. The audience should feel, but that's a whole story about how to get the feelings.
Yeah, I love that. It's like the whole indication question, right? Like, are you indicating because you're trying to show the audience your emotion or what you're feeling or thinking?
Yeah.
Or are you indicating because you're trying to get a reaction out of the other character in the scene? In which case, it's usually more okay than trying to show your emotion to the audience, right?
It's not. I mean, you don't put it on the outside, and I get where they're coming from. I work with pros, and they have bad habits. I work with brand newbies that don't know, and they're so passionate, and they so want to feel it, right? And I'm like, figure out what's going on. I mean, there are a lot of answers upcoming, but if you trust me, I will help you get there. But let's start first with what the scene is about and what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The what is my ultimate goal? Why am I saying what I'm saying? Not how am I going to say it, right?
Well, yeah, and that comes into playing and improvising and having all kinds of relaxed attitude about what's going on. But I think, I have these kind of 6 things I want him to go through. And always the first one is find an objective. And that's a fancy word for what you want. And it should be simple and you should be able to say it in one sentence. And it's not, can I come in and sit in a chair and someone says, why don't you sit down? No, that wasn't the objective. The objective has to go a little bit longer and it has to encompass something of what's going on in the scene. And it really, that little kind of question really does put things in perspective.
Mhm. Nice. Well, now you've kind of piqued my curiosity. You said that there are 6 things. Number one is find an objective. Are you open to sharing the other ones for people who are
Oh,
curious?
yeah, there's so, I have always believed that I'm sort of the Mutt school of acting. I trained with Shakespearean actors from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, and I did very technical theater for Shakespeare and the classics. And then I had work at Actors Studio, and I got a lot out of Meisner technique. So I think actors find their process eventually. But I think there are basic things you want to know. You want to know what you want. You want to know why you want it, maybe. You want to know what stands in your way. And probably the third one or fourth one, whatever that is, that kind of separates the men from good actors from novices is How are you going to get what you want? And that's where I think you have a lot of leeway. And the script is your guide, but you'd be surprised the people that kind of overlook all the suggestions of strategies and ways that we try to work people. And if you want to be creative, that's what you got to look at. But there's a few others, the relationship, the setting, and I'll talk a little bit later about something I call the event, which I think is important.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
My next main question here is what are some of the major mistakes that you see actors making in their performances? We obviously talked a bit about indication already, but
Yeah.
beyond that or in addition.
The two things that I think are kind of connected, and I'll start with the first one. I think actors, unfortunately, they forget how to have what I call an inner focus. And I've done a lot of work on camera, and there are great opportunities to bring the audience into your world that I think even on intimate stages now, we want to see the actors think. We want to see them come to a conclusion. And actors will say, well, I remember the time I was walking with grandma, blah, blah, blah. And nothing is going on. They're not visualizing anything. They haven't done what I call see the movie in their mind. And when they do that, when they really allow themselves to visualize, right? And I say that with the thought that you want to know your nouns too. And that sounds so kind of what? You get a script and maybe you referenced Aunt Helen, or you go, this weekend, let's go to the lake. And maybe there's nothing else in the script where you're at the lake. And maybe they never get to the lake. But in this scene, you reference it. Well, maybe it'd be a good idea to go, okay, that's Upper Saranac Lake. I know that lake. I can picture a cabin there. Or Aunt Frida. I don't have a dear aunt, but that librarian is a piece of work. Maybe you just make little notes in your head. So when eventually you do those and you say, oh gosh, I'll never forget when she talked to me that way and she embarrassed me in front of the whole class. You have the time to remember that, at least a flash. And sometimes it's a flash like a photograph. Sometimes it's a whole recall. And whether you use your senses, it doesn't have to be a big emotional stake. It depends on what you're doing. But knowing kind of, I'll say, who are you talking to? That was an old thing in commercials, right? And the answer was supposed to be my best friend. And then I'd say, great, who is that? And you'd be amazed how many people go, doesn't matter, right? And I'd say, well, maybe not. But who makes you smile, or who do you share your secrets with? So this ability to visualize, right? And it's not looking at the ceiling. It's like, stop looking at the ceiling. Your memories aren't there, right? Inner focus. How many times have you seen a movie where somebody suddenly goes away and pauses, and you're like, where are they? Where did they go? That draws us in. We love to see actors think. And like I say, we love to see them then make a decision. So if you ignore all that, particularly for camera, I think you miss a great opportunity. I've seen really moments where actors add this and get cast. I mean, it sounds like a simple thing, but not a lot of actors do it.
I love that. It's it is very, very important to that's that's sort of like that little difference between just that performance that is fine. It's like it looks natural, but then there's something that when you actually have something real in your head and you're really experiencing it, like you could just tell, like suddenly it's just way more interesting to look at. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh
Well,
wow.
I think this was what I was going to talk about with the event too, because um, very often a scene you're taught, I mean, film is shot out of sequence or in sequence, but sometimes, they say be so totally present for this moment of time. Don't worry about the rest of it. And I go, yeah, but there might be some event, I think of a movie like, an early Ordinary People comes to mind just because I was working on it recently. And one of the young main character has tried to commit suicide. And I'm trying to remember if you see it. He goes into therapy, it's referenced a lot. It's important for the actor to know that's happened because later it affects his scenes with his psychologist. It affects his scenes with his dad, who loves him so much, and now he's out of the um, psychiatric hospital. His mother that can't forgive him for it. Um, that's what I would call an event. And I compare it sometimes to like a carry-on luggage. It might be stored up above and you don't really need it. It might be at your feet under the front seat, or it might be open on your lap. What about that is going to affect this scene? And it's amazing how many actors will forget about that or not have, I guess the word is fleshed it out, not really visualized it. And as soon as we do an exercise, sometimes I'll have them talk about it. Sometimes we'll do a two-person scene. Well, we'll improvise that moment. Um, wow. And then later you do the scene where it's not even maybe referred to, but everybody knows it's happened. It's as if, I think my goal with a lot of actors is to get them to not act, to just be, right? And that sounds sort of arty, but if you've visualized all this, if you've daydreamed, if you've imagined these past events, then it's like you live them. It's like the lie you tell over and over again. At a certain point, you go, did I do that? So if you can fake yourself out, by creating false histories or false pasts, it's exciting. It feels truthful. It feels like it kind of releases a lot of things for people.
That's awesome. I love it. Um, Now, I'm going to just bring you back for a second.
Sure.
The very beginning of this, the question that I originally asked was the major mistakes that you see actors making in their performances. And one you said is that people don't visualize it, but you did mention that there is a second one. So I don't know if that's
Oh,
correct
that
or
one.
if,
Oh yeah, I think the focus, the I well, working too much on their feelings, working too much to
okay.
just
Yeah.
play it something. I'm supposed to be angry or
Yeah, so that makes sense. So that was the second one, the
yeah,
first thing being the indication. Perfect. I just
yeah,
wanted
I
to make
think
sure
so.
that I
I
didn't
think
miss it.
those were them. We'll see.
Excellent.
We'll
No,
probably
no,
cover
no.
it somewhere else.
That's perfect. Well, my next question now is how do you recommend that actors practice on their own? Some actors, whether it's they just aren't in an area where an easy or good acting class is available.
Yeah.
Others right now, with the economy and stuff, they may need to practice on their own, reading books and different things. But what do you recommend for that?
I saw that and I went, oh wow, that's a hard one. Even getting an actor to read with you, for these self tapes, or find a person who is not, going to feed you the lines with enough help that you won't be distracted. I wrote in my head when I saw the possibility of this question that you want to work on your imagination. And it's like, okay, so how do you do that? Well, where are your ideas coming from? And I think, when I work with young actors, they don't have a lot of life experience. So I say, okay, you have to imagine this. So do you give yourself some time to daydream? What got you into acting in the first place? For me, it was probably dress up when I was a kid, but I would order everyone around. So it's interesting that I'm sort of directing now. But I could see things. I loved the costumes, of course, but I had a very rich fantasy life. And I think, you know, actors need to observe that you could always be working on your imagination, and I say, well, okay, how? Well, you watch of course, you should watch good film. You should watch TV, film, everything. And then you should say, okay, how would I do that? Or what did the actor do? And maybe you watch it multiple times. In this day and age, that's easy to do. You can always get things from the library. I used to recommend that people read plays and read them aloud. Get used to hearing your voice, get used to trying things, maybe get a small group of friends together. That can be great fun. Before you know it, you started a local theater. You
Awesome.
want to be able to step into the shoes of different characters. And I think I'm very pro education with my students. And many times they're like, okay, do I go to college? Do I hit New York or LA? Almost 9 times out of 10, I'll say some education, because knowing about the world, right? It might be a piece of art that moves you. Years ago in high school, I had a great drama teacher, naturally, and she would bring in pictures and say, this is your character. And I'd look at it and go, huh? And then she'd explain it. Eventually I saw where she was coming from and what she was trying to get me to do. And or imagine, right? Music will do that to a lot of people. Music will often say what the heart can't, right? I think nature, more and more I'll take a walk and I brainstorm, while I'm out in the breeze and spring is coming, but even the winter. I think imagination is really important. And I don't think, a lot of people have 9 to 5 jobs. Maybe you're in school full time. Where do you find the time? Well, you're on your phone. There are a lot of things which distract us. And here's a case where you can watch TV and say, it's research. you know, I do think that's one great thing. I really do.
I'll just share an interesting story that just
Yeah.
happened to me because I went out of town on a vacation with my wife and son just like last week or yeah. And so we're at the airport going through security and I'm taking everything out and then uh, I realize where's my phone? And
Oh no.
I realized that I had left it in the car. My mother-in-law, who dropped us off, was driving home already, and there wouldn't be enough time. And I was just like, all right, I guess I'm going out of town with no phone. This is going to be interesting.
No.
But you know what happened was crazy. I went on this like detox thing and just like I became more calm. Like so many things changed. And we all hear it like, oh, get off your phones or whatever. But I think like, I mean, it is possible to like put your phone down for times instead. Like, I'm going for a walk with my dog and have my phone out, or I'm getting changed and I'm watching something on YouTube or whatever. But putting that away and just like letting your mind wander and think,
Yes.
I think is so helpful to rebuilding the imagination that all the content is kind of destroyed.
I hadn't thought, my first thought was, what did you do? You used your wife's phone. I
We
was
did use
already,
our phone if we needed like directions and
no,
stuff.
no,
But
I think I don't have my phone when I walk. I walk pretty much every day. It's kind of, no, it's a question of staying healthy, but I'll walk about 2 miles and I'm out for an hour. And sometimes it's the same walk, but I think of different things. I see different things. It's really it's my morning, and then I'll go do something else physical. And in no case do I have my phone, you know. Uh I think it's very helpful to let your time to do nothing, right?
mm,
Set aside time to do nothing and see what happens. Um, I mean, actors, well, I say something later about humor, but I think, you know, actors need their well-being too. And if that helps your well-being, it will be time well spent. I do think people can learn a language, they can study history. There are so many things that actors can use in their work that relate. And I think I knew more. I think I learned my history after playing some great Shakespearean, I played Constance and King John. I wish I'd known more. I was getting it sort of secondhand, but I think knowing your history, whatever your passion is, right? And that's probably important. Find something you enjoy besides acting, because you'll be more interesting. All the years I did agent showcases, tell me about yourself. We're getting off topic, but actors would say, well, what do you want to know? And I'd say, this is your opportunity to lead.
yeah,
Lead with what you're interested in. And it doesn't have to be about acting. Tell them you play trombone. Tell them you are double jointed. Whatever it is. Um, know what's interesting about yourself. And the agents say, wow, I love talking to her because she and I shared our love of Great Danes, or
it's so true.
Labradors, whatever it was.
I have one of my consulting clients who I work with. He's been a lawyer. He was a lawyer for like 30 years or whatever, and because of that, he is getting auditions for like Law and Order and everything just because of his other career. And it's like
Yep.
if you're only focused on acting and you just it doesn't give people a reason to notice you from the crowd, basically.
I think that's really good advice. John Sada is one of the students I often go, well, you know him. He was on this and this and this, and LA, Chicago PD, et cetera, and La Brea most recently. But he was an amateur boxer. He was doing really well, and I was trying to pull him into acting while his manager was trying to pull him into boxing. And we eventually won, but his first break was a boxing movie. So there you go. You never know where that's going to help.
Nice. Well, is there any other advice that you'd like to share with actors who might be listening to this?
Oh man. Of course I would say this, but years ago, I had an agent showcase and he said, all the actors come in and say, how can I become an actor? And he said, you know what my answer always is? Learn to act. And I said, you're my kind of agent. Of course, I'm pro training, right? I think an actor should take a class. And if you know a lot, and even if you're a graduate, it's like staying in shape. I used to say, I have this class, it's like an actor gym. Come back when you can, stay in shape. But I think the bigger answer here is work to expand your castability, become multi-talented. If you can carry a tune, learn to sing. If you have two left feet, try to learn to move well. You want to stay fit. You want to stay in shape, whatever your body type. Acting takes a lot of energy. So you want to make sure you're feeding, feeding your instrument. It sounds so a little religious, but I think you will feel better and have more stamina, even if you're young and foolish. uh, Improving your speaking voice is always a good idea. I think both in support, but also in tone and diction. I know some of my actors are doing comedy and sitcom auditions, and I say, man, you wrecked the joke because I didn't understand what you said. It's something simple as that. Um, I know actors that like to write. I'd say, great, write your own material, write yourself a monologue. You might be able to do it on your reel. But I think it's really important too, and I, in the years that I did all these showcases, and believe me, there were lot for a while, my showcases were unique and they got great results. Like 75% got signed with an agent, and I'd hear feedback through the years about how they're doing. You really want to take a professional attitude about both the work and potentially your career. And that means you want to be the pro in the room. You want to know the proper etiquette. You're never late. You never ever lie to your agent. Boy, that can be a biggie sometimes. You don't gossip. You never know where somebody's going to end up. You're nice to everybody, right? These kind of things, sometimes you learn, like I think I knew early on that you never direct another actor, but it's surprising how many times could you, she didn't say that the way she wasn't. I'm like, the answer. You want her to be mad at you got to tick her off, you got to bust her buns a bit. Oh, I can do that. Yeah, maybe, so all these things, but all the advice, probably, maybe the best is to develop a sense of humor because I've thought about this. You watch a talk show and you see somebody like a Tom Hanks, or I'm trying to think of else, and they're so fun to listen to, and everyone's having a great time talking to them. And there are going to be so many times if you go on and have a career, even a very successful career, where you're out of work. You have no work, you have no prospects for work. Maybe you have no social life or prospects for that either. Man, if you have a sense of humor, that'll help so much through all those times to just go, I can get through this. It's not the end of the world. It's like one of those things like having a rich uncle. you in the business, having funds and support, but a sense of humor will make you the person everyone wants to work with, right? You'll be the person, if they work with you, they want to work with you again.
Yeah, no, that's true. I loved what you said earlier about the constant building of those additional skills, and I would just add to it for anybody who is doing that, make sure that you have a video or photo or something that demonstrates somehow that skill on your profiles. Like if you can do a specific accent or speak another language, if you don't have anything showing that, that's a problem. It's better to have a sample of it.
Very, very good advice. Yeah, I've had some really good students that had skills and I've never seen them do it. And they may be having a vocal coach and I'm like, would you just sing for me? Can I see you dance? I mean, I had someone who had been all these ballet companies who was trying to be, in television and he didn't want to go in for dancing roles, but when he showed that to me, it was great. It was like, well,
Nice.
fabulous. Now I know this whole other superpower you possess. No, it made a big impression on me.
That's awesome. This has been awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about your acting school, where you're located, and what makes your classes different than many others?
Yes. Well, right now when I work online and I work in New York. Um, and it goes by term and I do private coaching. In New York, it's on West 30th Street, sort of centrally located. Zoom is anytime for anyone all over the world. Um, did you ask what makes my school different?
Yeah, like your method of
Yeah,
teaching,
I
anything that you're open to sharing.
I I think I would say in short, the blend. Um, I've been doing this a long time, over 40 years now, and I came from a theater background, so I always combined what I consider sort of the discipline or the technique of the theater with the spontaneity and naturalness of the camera.
Mm.
And even if I had a basic theater course, I said, let's put this on camera. And that eventually evolved into what I call film technique, which I would explain to the students as, you're learning all the acting basics, but I'm going to photograph you and you're going to watch it. And this comes back to, one picture is worth 1,000 words. I love to talk, but it's I've discovered it's so much more expedient for me to say, look, I'm going to make this adjustment and you might disagree with it, but just wait and we'll play it back. And then you play back and someone looks at it and goes, oh, it's almost not debatable. I see why you had me do that. Or I see why you talked to her and I thought you weren't paying attention, but when you directed her to do this, then I could do that. And it melds it. Um, I think more and more now we want our actors to be believable, even in a huge Broadway house. I remember when I saw Gypsy years ago, I think it was Patti LuPone, and I sat in the sixth row and I said, I wonder what I'm going to see. And they were so into each other and so conversational, but you could hear way in the back. Um, I think I've always focused on television. I believe I was the first in the United States to offer on-camera acting training for teenagers and young adults. And I was affiliated with an adult school who had pioneered that for adults back in the 1960s, I think, or 50s. So when I started, um, I said, okay, this is what I know about acting. And now I'm applying it to the camera, which was sort of new. I mean, I was sort of the first one to do it. And as a result, it really was a hit because there were so many people who didn't know what they were doing. They couldn't watch themselves and they were often too big from stage and they didn't trust the work. Um, so this being able to give actors an eye to their work is really, it allows them to get a better sense of what the audience is seeing and what the audience should feel. It it really helps a lot. I guess besides that blend, I have a lot of experience. I do think an actor um, working off a recommendation for a teacher, look for experience. I was a working actor when I started in the theater union in Equity when I was 19 and quickly got into the other union, SAG and AFTRA. And I sort of said, I never looked back. But this schooling was a lark. It was a surprise to me to be teaching, but it was very successful, and I got all kinds of industry acclaim, and agents sent their people to me, and I got awards from backstage. But I think having a teacher who has expertise is really important, and maybe that they love what they do. I still really love what I do, and my friends will contest to this. I'll have a class and I'll go, oh, I tried this and I've never tried this before, but we did such and such. And I feel like I'm still coming up with ideas. I'm still innovating if that's possible. And I think my students benefit from that. So, between working on camera and everything, I feel my students really learn how to listen and how to remember, back to inner focus, and then how to respond. So it all comes pretty clear. But you had asked me to talk about Zoom, working with teens. Uh, Pretty much everyone during COVID was up to here with Zoom, right?
Really
And
quick, just to clarify though, for
yeah.
people listening to this, you only work with teens or you work with other people as
Oh,
well?
thank you for that. No, I work with all ages.
Okay, cool.
Probably not that young. Privately, I'll have the occasional student under, say, 13, 14. No, for a long time, because I was affiliated with an adult school, even though I had my own ACTeen is what it was called, corporation. I did not teach adults there because it was a conflict of interest.
Mhm.
But once I moved into other studios or renting studio space, I teach all ages. In fact, now they're predominantly adults, although I'll take teens who want to be challenged. But I think I'm a kind teacher, even for someone new, and take some of that trepidation away. But the thing about working on Zoom is, first of all, I'm good at it. I've been doing on-camera coaching for Skype, when there was no Zoom. So my goal when I started doing classes was, okay, I have to figure out how to do scenes, and I got that in short order. Zoom was very helpful about that. And I want the student, they're moving, they're hitting marks, they're sharing things across that void, they're reacting. And so it's physical, they're not just sitting. But when they sit, this is what we're seeing now, right? This is the
Yeah.
self-tape. This is the box actors have to be comfortable in.
For those listening and not seeing, what she's showing is just like shoulders up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, like top of head to breastbone, basically.
Yeah.
And this box is, during COVID, no one was going to auditions, and they were self-submitting. Well, that's not going away. Um, College auditions have pre-screens. You submit your monologues. It might be the same close-up. So if you're not comfortable in that, and that tight a situation, you have to become comfortable.
Yeah.
And I believe sincerely that actors learn so much. Zoom is very helpful, very conducive to recording. You record, you send them the playbacks, boom, there it is. So it's not difficult. Of course, I have my camera and my equipment I bring in when we do on-site classes. And for some people, that chemistry is really important for the other students. But if you have an audition, or even just if you want to work with other people, but you can't be coming in, you can't travel, you can't commute, you can't commit to, there's a snowstorm, will my car come out of my driveway? I have to say, I like the simplicity of it. So I encourage people to give it a try. I think most of the time, even if you're just learning to act, you'll get a lot out of working with me if it has to be on Zoom.
Awesome. And how can they get in touch?
Oh, well, I'm online, ritalitton.com. That's my name, but I email Rita at ritalitton.com. And the website gives you a lot of information, but it's got the classes, and always feel free to call and ask questions. And if I'm teaching, leave a message, because we all get our share of spam calls. So make sure you leave a message, because I'll get back to everyone right
Yeah,
away.
we'll include the contact information in the show notes as well.
Thanks.
So, excellent.
Any final questions, Martin?
No, I mean this is amazing. I very much appreciate your time here. Very helpful for people learning all of these different things to kind of keep in mind, and hopefully anybody who is interested in working with you, I know that you do amazing work. So feel free to reach out and
Can I give you a plug too?
oh, I mean, of
Can
course.
always cut it out later. I think you're probably the best at what you do in helping actors figure out how to get into it. Once you have good skills, and you probably teach them that too, but the concept of framing your career in a positive way, I know a lot about it, but I've been looking at much of what you have online and your services. And if I had to recommend someone, you would be the one I'd recommend for this, because not every acting teacher likes to get in the weeds. It's that tough thing of, am I going to be responsible for you now? Am I going to fret that the agent won't like you or won't take my reference and will say cruel things about your castability or whatever. And you really help actors sort through a lot of that grief in a very expedient way. So
Well,
good for
thanks.
you. Congratulations. I'm impressed.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And
Thank you.
yeah, really appreciate it.
All right. Have a great one.
Well, thanks for listening. Now, if you want to dive even deeper on acting technique, I highly recommend checking out my podcast called How to Hook Casting Directors in the First 5 Seconds of Your Acting Reel, which is episode number 147. I dive deep on how to make those first opening seconds really pop and grab people's attention right away. Check it out. Again, it's episode number 147, How to Hook Casting Directors in the First 5 Seconds of Your Acting Reel on the Actor's Career Compass. Finally, if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, you can learn more about how that works on my website, martinbenson.com. I'd love to speak with you and see if you'd be a good fit for my coaching program. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.